on YouTube, along with Facebook and Zoom, along with our host, Sister Amira Bey.
Facebook. We back again. You know what time it is. Wednesday, the 19th Element, California Radio, where Dr. Alim brings you world news. Welcome back, Dr. Alim.
It's good to be back. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Greetings. Can you hear me? I hope I can be heard. I think so. Happy New Year's for those who are celebrating the New Year. Merry Christmas for the Orthodox Christians who are celebrating still the 12 days of Christmas. And I hope all is well with every one of you, wherever you may be, wherever you may be viewing this broadcast from. This is the 19th Element. I'm your host, Dr. Alim, assisted by Sister Amira Bey. And we do this every week, inshallah, to bring you up to date on some of the geopolitical issues that affect all of us. We're talking about global issues, strategic issues of war and peace. And it seems that since the new year into 2026, it seems as though things have heated up tremendously. Things have speeded up tremendously. And from day to day, from minute to minute, you just don't know what to expect, except to expect something that is stupendous, something that is amazing, something that is unprecedented, something that has never happened before. What is being normalized are things that just a little while ago were unheard of and totally unacceptable. But now, murder on the high seas, the invasions of sovereign countries, the kidnapping of the presidents of countries, hijacking and piracy on the high seas, the destruction of infrastructure in other countries, wholesale genocide being committed in the public, blatantly. And all of this over the last year or two has become normalized. And so the 19th Element exists, to take note that we live in a world that's gone crazy. We live in a world that is now broke. We live in a world that is now berserk and out of control. And so we do the best we can to bring you up to date, not to confuse you, because you're already confused, but to point out the trends in the historical events that are taking place as we live. So, Sister Amira, let's go to our images. And as we look at these images and headlines, I'll try to make some commentary on it. And because it is the beginning of the year, I'm going to be making some predictions, about what I think some of these things mean. Now, before we really get started, I want to announce that we're going to begin the republication of the brief manual on deliberative dialogue that was written in 2007 as a prelude to the now famous Farm Dialogue Conference. And so that was in preparation for that conference, and that's what made the conference so successful, was that the more than 1,000 laborers who attended that conference had already read the book. And the book gives the rules and the roles and the responsibilities of deliberative dialogue. And so it's been out of publication for a while, but with modern equipment, I'm told by my associates that we can get it easily republished and available on Amazon. And so we're going to see how fast we can make that happen. Now, yes, the screen is very clear. The image is perfect. And this was the last image that I sent to you, Sister Amira. But actually, this is the image that tells the whole story, the backstory about what is taking place, the history, the historical story. Now, some years ago, I think during the Baby Bush administration, there was talk about the Union of North America, or the North American Union, the need for a new currency called the Amero. And the North American Union was going to be a new country composed of the Union of Canada, the United States of America, and Mexico. It was called the North American Union. Now, of course, the North American Union wasn't a new idea because it had been proposed before under a different name. If you look in the lower left-hand corner of this map, I think this map was drawn in, I'm trying to look here, maybe it doesn't really have the date, but it was around 1940. It was around 1940 that certain people in certain circles in America, many of them affiliated with what was going on in Nazi Germany at the same time. Don't forget that the banking interests of the Third Reich under Hitler was being managed in North America by Prescott Bush, the grandfather of Baby Bush. He was handling the financial affairs of the Nazis in America during the time of the drawing of this map. So if you understand that these people had certain plans in store for Europe, they also had plans in store for North America, the same people. As you know, as legend would have it, in the aftermath of World War II, the Nazis were defeated. But they do say that they fled to Argentina, that they said Adolf Hitler didn't die, but that he lived out his last days in Argentina. And some even allege that the Nazis fled to Antarctica and that they have bases in Antarctica and that they developed UFO technology. Well, I don't know if all of that is true, but if you just look at what people do instead of what they call themselves, if you actually look at what they do, which is to say, what is their policy, you see that there has been no change in policy. Now, see, what is that called? The technate of North America. See, the technate of North America is what they envisioned. See, this was actually in answer to the book that came out in 1933, written by Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. A world dominated by scientists and technocrats, technology. A world ruled by machines, computers. An artificial, dystopian, anti-human kind of a world. A slave technocracy, where human beings are relegated to enslavement under the control of technocrats and their machines, their computers, their artificial intelligence. And some would call that the manifestation of Dajjal, digital intelligence, the Antichrist, the ghost in the machine. And so these were the lunatic visions going back at least to the 1940s. But if you search even deeper in history, you see that it goes even further. And you see the central point that Cuba plays in this whole scenario. If you've ever been to Havana, Cuba, you will see that Havana, Cuba has a fantastic, startling architecture, monumental architecture, buildings that were built to last, it would seem, 1,000 years. And in fact, as you walk through the streets of Havana, you realize, hey, these buildings have been under sanctions for what, 70 years? And even though they need a paint job, hey, they don't fall down because they're made out of stone. And they have a monumental look to them because if you go back even before the Civil War, and one of the reasons for the Civil War in America was to establish a slave empire with the capital city at Havana, Cuba. And it was going to have, it was going to incorporate a territory of 1,000 miles radius from Havana, which would stretch all the way up to Richmond, Virginia, of course, which became the capital city of the Confederacy. And it was in a circle that would sweep 1,000 miles of territory, including Mexico, the parts of the southwest of the United States, all of Texas, all of Central and the northern tip of South America, including Panama, Colombia, and of course, Venezuela. And of course, all of the islands of the Caribbean. And that would be a slave empire. And it was going to be ruled by the people who were running the slave plantations in the South, running the slave plantations in the Caribbean. This same aristocratic class that now call themselves oligarchs. But you see, in the years preceding the Civil War, they didn't have the technology to make it work. In 1940, they had the vision, but they didn't have the technology to make it work. But now today, with modern equipment, they have the technology. And they think that they can make it work. And what you see at work is this devilish work, and they think that they have expanded it so that now they think, hey, the original, they called themselves at that time in the secret societies, the Knights of the Golden Circle. See that 1,000-mile radius slave kingdom? See, that was the Golden Circle. And it was to be brought about by the Knights of the Golden Circle. And so these present-day knights, like the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, they're knights of the Golden Circle. Trump himself, the Knight Commander of the Knights of the Golden Circle, also called the Knights of Malta, and many other secret society designations. But he's the chief knight of them all. I mean, Donald Trump, he's the knight commander of all of the knights all over the world. And so he's mobilizing all of the knights that we now call military chiefs and generals, that we now call, heads of the defense departments in various countries. And he's the knight commander of them all. And so all of them have been mobilized for war, one final war to establish now what could not be established 200 years ago, what Napoleon could not establish, what Hitler could not establish. Now it can be done with modern technology. And so all of the high-tech oligarchs have already been sworn in to carry out warfare like it's never been done before. And so you see the rapid overthrow of regimes overnight, seemingly without a fight. So Sister Amira, let's go take a look at our headlines with that historical background so that you actually understand what's taking place on the world stage before your eyes. These are remarkable things that are taking place. So that's going to be with the first batch I sent you. Yeah, so now we're going to be looking at a lot of things here and there all over the world, things that are taking place right now, maybe some history to go along with it. Excuse me, and then in some cases, perhaps a peek into the future. So this $50 billion space strategy gave China control over Africa's satellites, labs, and tech training in less than a decade. And so what they're pointing out is that China invested $50 billion in Africa and now controls the information space of Africa. And Africa, within that protected space, is now able to develop, I think it's called AfriNet, and other internet platforms that allow for better communication among Africans. Because with the Western system that used to be in place, Africans had no alternative but to allow all of their emails, all of their communications, all of their videos, all of their photographs, first had to pass through Paris, first had to pass through London, first had to pass through Washington, first had to pass through Tel Aviv on its way to its intended connection. So in other words, the Western world had carte blanche ability to listen in on everything that every African ever said over the internet, much as they do to the people who actually live in the West. Whereas we know the National Security Agency is recording every keystroke, listening to every word that is spoken by every person at every time on the internet. And of course, a lot of that is being controlled from Tel Aviv. So what was being done to Africa, it's not as though it wasn't being done to Americans, but it's just that China stepped in, made a $50 billion investment over a 10-year period of time, which, if you think about it, $5 billion a year is not all that much for a country like China. And now they have an internet and satellite infrastructure over Africa that protects Africa from the scrutiny of the West. And so this is a kind of high-tech sovereignty that gets too little attention, but is so important. Next image, please. Suppose you were an African leader trying to plot a strategy, and every word you say is being overheard by your enemy. See, now basically, do as I say, or I will bomb you into the Stone Age. So who does that sound like? I mean, who would be capable of making a statement like that? Well, of course, the immediate answer would be, well, that sounds like Donald Trump's diplomacy. Well, how is Donald Trump's diplomacy any different than Joe Biden's diplomacy? I mean, how many times did Joe Biden threaten to bomb somebody into the Stone Age? I've been hearing that all my life. I think Richard Nixon was threatening to bomb Vietnam back into the Stone Age. That seems to be America's policy. LBJ was talking about bombing Cambodia into the Stone Age. And then as lately as Ronald Reagan, they're threatening the Soviet Union. We're going to bomb you into the Stone Age. And I recently heard the Europeans threatening Russia, saying, we're going to bomb you back into the Stone Age. And wasn't that Bibi Netanyahu back in June threatening Iran? We're going to bomb you back into the Stone Age. Well, how is it that these people know so much about the Stone Age? Because they're Stone Age people. And they don't know anything about polite diplomacy. They don't know anything other than Stone Age diplomacy, which we will, in other words, we will just beat you into submission and drag you home into the cave. Next image, please. Do as I say, or we'll bomb you back into the cave age. U.S. Space Command taps SpaceX for missile warning tracking satellites. So don't forget that one of the first things that Trump did in his new administration last January, about a year ago, Elon Musk, along with all of the Silicon Valley oligarchs, as they like to call themselves, these big tech billionaires, as they're said to be, they were all lined up, about 12 of them, at the White House, and they gave a great big party. Trump said he was going to invest $500 billion. See, the Chinese, they just invested $50 billion in Africa, and Trump said we're going to invest $500 billion with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Larry Ellison, these big companies like Palantir and Oracle and Microsoft, Bill Gates, all of them, billionaires already, but promised by Donald Trump $500 billion more on top of the billions that they already have, or claim to have. And so they were sworn in as lieutenant colonels. So in other words, they're just not the CEOs anymore of big tech corporations. The big 7 corporations that are upholding the entire stock market, all of the CEOs of those big tech corporations are now military officers in the chain of command under the commander-in-chief. They were sworn in a public ceremony about a year ago as lieutenant colonels. In other words, SpaceX is working for the military. Oracle is working for the military. NVIDIA is working for the military. Microsoft is working for the military. They take orders from the military, from the war chief, from the Secretary of War, the Maltese Knight, who's under the command of the Knight Commander himself, Donald Trump. So now Mussolini's definition of fascism is when government and corporations are so tightly intertwined that you can't tell the difference. And so that's what we're looking at here. And so I wasn't going too far when I raised the question out loud. I wonder whether the Nazis really did lose World War II, or whether they secretly won and fooled everybody into thinking they lost, so they could really take over later, because they had a bigger agenda than it seemed in the 1940s. They didn't have a U.S. Space Command then. Now they do. And so Elon Musk is setting up a missile warning system and for tracking satellites, because they're planning a global war. The battle in the sky becomes a reality. Next image, please. I don't have a headline, but China just announced, I think they're getting ready to launch, I think it's over 100,000 satellites. Elon Musk is trying to launch 42,000, which sounds like a lot. It is a lot. But China just announced it's over 100,000 satellites they're getting ready to launch. Everybody's launching satellites. Iran launched satellites last week. They launched 2 military satellites last week, Iran. And that's what allowed them to shut down the internet that was creating the riots in Iran through SpaceX and their satellites. So this headline says, forget Silicon Valley, the world's most powerful tech machine is now running out of Beijing. Now that big machine, that's a tunnel boring machine. And they're boring tunnels through mountains. And they say they want to bore a tunnel from Siberia, from Vladivostok in Russia. They would use one of these big boring machines and bore under the Bering Straits and come up to the surface somewhere in Alaska. And that would unite the Western and Eastern hemispheres for trade and commerce. That would be a part of the Chinese New Silk Road, where they would reestablish the trade routes that they had 500 years ago. 500 years ago, the Chinese Navy, of course, was the biggest Navy on earth. And so as it was 500 years ago, now the Chinese Navy is now the biggest Navy on earth. And so they want to use these big machines like this to connect the entire world, because inside these, see, that would drill a tunnel for at least 2 lanes of these high-speed trains, maglev trains. And they showed one off last week. They have maglev trains that reach 900 miles an hour, better than 900 miles an hour, going through a tube like this. And so you could create commerce, commercial traffic all over the world at very low cost. The initial investment would be huge, but once it was set up, the transportation costs would pretty much go down to zero, just like you used to have to put a postage stamp to mail a letter. But once you invested in the internet, now you can send an email almost for free. Not literally free, but it's almost free. You can think of it as free. Next image, please. So forget Silicon Valley, the real tech oligarchs are being born in China. See, so now these are the categories where the Chinese are taking the leadership. EV batteries and energy storage. They're making quantum leaps in communications. They're taking the lead in AI and machine learning. They have hypersonic missile detection because they have hypersonic missiles, and the United States doesn't. They have swarm drone systems. They can put like 50,000 to 100,000 individual drones in the sky at the same time and make facial patterns, make patterns in the sky, make scenes. But of course, they could all be weaponized as well, whatever is needed. Optical satellite networks. These are the satellites, when they say optical, they're talking about lasers. So these would be weaponized satellites that could blind Elon Musk satellites. And of course, advanced jet engines is what allows you to have hypersonic missiles. And so the U.S. only has old-fashioned engines. And semiconductor equipment is necessary to make future advances in high-tech areas. Next image, please. So China is taking the lead, and America's lagging behind. And that's what this is really all about. How can we pull off what we're trying to pull off around the world? If we are lagging behind China, China might decide that there needs to be a different agenda than our agenda. So in 2023, China took the lead in global patents. In other words, the invention of new things, innovation, bringing about change, bringing about an improvement in the quality of life. Since Mao's time, China has liberated or uplifted 300 million people from abject poverty into the middle class. And since the rule of Xi Jinping, the current president of China, he's lifted 100 million more Chinese people out of poverty into the middle class. So now China has a middle class of at least 400 to 500 million people. And the quality of life surpasses that enjoyed in America and Europe. I was in China more than 10 years ago. I could see the quality of life then seemed to surpass most Americans. But it wasn't everywhere in China. And Xi Jinping has reached out into the countryside that had been neglected before, and now they're coming up to a middle class standard of living. So in all of these different areas, you can see, look, stem cell graduates. See, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad wrote in the 1970s about the destruction of America's education. Well, we'll look at the education in China. They are graduating every year millions of engineers, millions of scientifically trained people. And of course, they have employment for them. They're not just graduating them, they put them to work in a booming economy, producing a future for China and the rest of the world. That's why China has so much to trade with other parts of the world. They have something for Africa to fulfill Africa's needs. Most of the consumer goods in America are being supplied by China. China says, we can give you what you need. And so they produce it. And so in all of these different areas, I'm not going to go through all of them, but at the bottom there, you see, when you measure all of the categories that matter in terms of technological leadership and development, China leads in 57 out of the 64 categories. And not more than 10 years ago, it used to be America instead of China. So if you want to know who is leading the world and to whom the future belongs, it's certainly not the United States anymore. And it could certainly be China from all these indicators. Next image, please. And so I think that's one of my predictions in 2026 is that it will be abundantly clear to the entire world that America has fallen and that China, in league with Russia and other nations like India and Brazil, are taking the lead. Now, this is very interesting and ironic and frightening. Breaking: deadly mystery disease ravages Cuba. We just talked about Cuba as Havana being the center of a golden circle of slavery that was a part of the Civil War in America. That's what they wanted to establish from Havana, Cuba. That's what all of the Cuban nationalists in Florida, that's what they're all about. They want to establish this golden kingdom of slavery. And of course, Cuba, since 1958, 59, the people have taken their sovereignty back. They fought for it under the leadership of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, and they solidified behind their revolutionary leaders, and they've held out under sanctions all these years. But now, a deadly mystery disease is ravaging Cuba. Next image, please. And so these are some of the scenes that are coming out of Cuba, where the hospital system is overwhelmed. Next image, please. And some people are saying now, not that you can necessarily take stories from the Sun to be the gospel truth, but something's going on in Cuba, and some people are crying out saying, we are dying. Mystery virus ravages Cuba, leaving hospitals on the verge of collapse as death toll covered up and medics are silenced. See, some people are saying that the Cuban government is covering up the situation because they don't want to panic the population. And of course, that might cause a regime collapse if the population thinks, that somebody messed up in the government. Next image. So here's a look of some of the images being posted out of Cuba. Now, of course, this doesn't look much different than an emergency room anywhere. They're always crowded. I was an emergency room physician for 7 years. So, I mean, this picture doesn't really tell me much, except uh, the damage done to Cuban infrastructure by the sanctions. They don't have the equipment they are supposed to have. Next image, please. Because of the sanctions. So if the health of Cubans is declining, it has something to do with the sanctions that they're forced to live under. And remember, one of the reasons that Trump wanted to take over Venezuela was to deny Venezuelan oil going to Cuba. He's trying to cut off all the oil supplies to Cuba. And so this is, again, scenes seemingly, allegedly, coming out of Cuba. But we live in an age of false information, disinformation. And so we can't be sure. We know most of the information coming out of Iran these days is false. So maybe the information coming out of Cuba is also false, making us, trying to mislead us in the wrong direction. And so if we had some direct communication from the people of Cuba, some of this is allegedly just that. Next image, please. But you can't be too sure these days. These look like authentic pictures to me. I had a good tour of the medical system in Cuba. Next image, please. So I saw places that did look like that. Now this is a busy slide, and basically it just gives you a list of all of the symptoms that people are complaining about. High fevers, headaches, pain and pressure behind the eyes. They have digestive problems, severe swelling of the joints that immobilizes you. Then people break out with a red rash. And the Cubans say, well, these are the symptoms of dengue fever. These are the symptoms of chikungunya virus. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And some other viruses that are endemic. But other people are saying, no, this is not like those old diseases that we're familiar with. There's something clearly different, more severe about this. And the Cuban government itself admits that this seems to be, what are they calling it, a combined arbovirus, a combined arbovirus. Well, I mean, I think in scientific language that would be considered a chimeric virus, a combination of many different natural viruses, but unnaturally combined into a weaponized virus, such as COVID-19. COVID-19 is a chimeric virus composed of many other different viruses, including the coronavirus, the rabies virus, the influenza virus, and others. And so maybe this is another weaponized chimeric virus that has been hurled at Cuba to destroy Cuba. Next image, please. To finally conquer Cuba. And so this is the virus riddle of the so-called mystery virus that's ravaging Cuba. Next image, please. Non-lethal weapons fired at protesters in, oh, you thought I was getting ready to say something about Caracas. No, non-lethal weapons fired at protesters in Hong Kong, Chile, and Iraq are having very dangerous, even deadly effects. So yes, some kind of strange weapon was used in the kidnapping of Maduro that immobilized the entire security force that was guarding him. They said America used some unknown weapon. All I'm trying to point out is these unknown weapons have been used before, such as in places like Hong Kong, Chile, and Iraq to control crowds. How about the lockdowns in Australia? And when all the people protested against the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns in Australia, what did they use? Non-lethal weapons that caused intense burning of the skin, and they drove the crowds out of the squares and shut down the protests. They did the same thing in Canada. You see, so these are not secret weapons. They use them all the time. And as usual, they're lying about how non-lethal they are. Next image, please. So they use them against any kind of protesters. Here's another non-lethal weapon. You could use these same kind of weapons to start forest fires. I mean, if you want to disperse a crowd, you don't need all that much heat. So you send it out in a wide ray. But if you want to focus the beam of light or heat, you call that a laser or a maser or some kind of a heat beam. And you could use that to start a forest fire like the ones in Los Angeles. There were eyewitness accounts of the fires being started by beams, some of the beams coming from trucks, some of the beams coming from drones. You remember that, don't you? How about in Maui, when some poor people were living in an area of valuable real estate in Maui, in Hawaii, and all of a sudden the whole area caught on fire, and all the houses burned down, and all the people had to move. And people caught on video, again, directed energy beams being used to burn down houses, to burn down forests. Next image, please. It's a new form of urban renewal, I suppose. They call them E-bombs, electronic bombs. And they're saying that this might be the one that they used in Venezuela when they kidnapped Maduro. I don't know. I'm not a military expert. Next image, please. But they say they can use these things to produce all kinds of effects. And it says that the entire security squad around Maduro began to bleed from their ears and from their nose and the mouth, you know, and they became disoriented. And then they were just couldn't defend themselves, and so they were easy targets, just got shot dead. And over 40 of them were shot. 32 Cubans got killed defending Maduro. And even Maduro's wife was injured. And so this is an image, fake or not, I don't know. Is this the real thing? The commandos going in? So this is what they did. See, again, these are not new weapons. See, look what happened in the invasion in Iraq. When Saddam Hussein had his, what did he call them? The Royal Guard or whatever they were called? The Republican Guard. And they were supposed to be a fierce fighting force. But the Americans went in with an undisclosed secret weapon that's called secret sound. A secret sound weapon is something that creates a sound in the mind of a person. They think they're hearing something. Nobody outside can hear anything. But it's like you hear something, a voice in your head. They call it secret sound technology. This was used in Iraq way back when, 2003. That's why the Republican Guards, they just threw up their arms. They put down their arms and surrendered. Because using this silent sound technology, they thought they heard the voice of Allah telling them to surrender. They thought they literally thought they were hearing the voice of Allah talking to them in their head, telling them to surrender, lay down your arms and surrender. And when they laid down their arms and surrendered, then the Americans came in with Apache helicopters and mowed them all down. Secret sound technology is nothing new. Next image, please. It's very effective. Now, this was somebody's sarcasm. You see, they're at the same time that they're charging the Somalis up in Minnesota with defrauding the government, that some say up to $1 trillion, hundreds of millions of dollars for sure. They found suitcases full of cash, money, at the airport, getting ready to be sent to Somalia. From the Somalians, over 80,000 of them in Minneapolis, all of them migrants from Somalia. They tell me that when they tested the Somalians in Minneapolis, they found out that these people are very low IQ people. Low IQ people. They said that the average Somalian in Minnesota has an IQ of around 70. 70. You know, just an inch above a moron. So now, how is it? That's what got me scratching my head because I must be a moron too. Because how in the world is it that these moronic people, these low IQ people, they're so stupid that they gypped you out of $1 trillion of money and sent it back home to family back home. And they're supposed to be stupid. They're the stupid ones. Come on now. But again, see, that's how racism blinds you. You know, you think these people are stupid. No, they just came to America and they said America is a money laundering place. That's what they do in America. They adopted the American way. You know, we launder money just like the Americans do all over the world. And we send it back home to our homeland in Somalia. And not only are they attacking the Somalians in Minnesota, don't forget now, almost every day of the week, Donald Trump is bombing Somalia in Africa and trying to aid a breakaway part of Somalia that can be recognized by Israel as a place to displace the Palestinians. See, so the Somalians are under attack, you know, everywhere. But they sure did trick Uncle Sam. To being so dumb, they sure did trick Uncle Sam. Next image, please. I wonder what they would do if they ever were smart. Suppose they were smart. Now, here's some smart people that run oil companies. They say, we don't want Trump's stolen oil. Yeah, Trump had a big powwow at the White House saying we now have control of Venezuela's 303 billion barrel oil reserve, the biggest in the world. Now we need you to invest $100 billion so we can bring it to market. And basically the oil execs say, we don't want stolen oil. That's a bad investment. That's a bad investment. we don't, because we're going to have to be there for 10, 15, 20 years before we can make a profit. And even though you have declared yourself to be in charge of Venezuela, Mr. Trump, in reality, outside of your fantasy world, those people actually run their own affairs. And it has yet to be proven that you have any control whatsoever over any Venezuelan oil. Because the oil tanker that you had the Coast Guard intercept in the mid-Atlantic was empty. It wasn't even empty. And then are you overlooking the fact, Mr. Trump, that when you overtook the empty oil tanker in the Atlantic at the same time, at the very same time, the Russians had taken control of 12 American oil tankers that were full? The Russians took 12 to your one and have them in port at Russian ports in the Arctic. So the Russians said, you can chase our empty oil tanker all you want, but we just took 12 of your full oil tankers. And all of them weren't oil tankers. Some of them had other goods, like weapons, headed for Ukraine and other places. The Russians got 12 American ships that they took over in one day, the same day that they took that oil tanker from Venezuela. Next image, please. See, so there's a war going on. U.S. seeks warrants to seize dozens more tankers linked to Venezuelan oil trade. See, it's this is piracy on the high seas. See, now a lot of people don't know that there's two different types of law. There's there's the law of the land, and then there's the law of the sea. They call it maritime law. So now, maritime law says you can't just steal somebody else's ship. You can't hijack commercial vessels on the high seas. You can't use a warrant from your country and apply it to international trade on the high seas. No, that's maritime law that rules on the high seas. And so on the high seas, you know, if you seize my vessel, I have a right to seize yours. And so Russia did just that. You seized one of ours? Okay, we seized 12 of yours. What are you going to do about it? And they took it to court. And so they have all of those American sailors from those 12 vessels. They have to appear as material witnesses, you know, in Russian courts. You see, so it gets complicated. And so basically it's the law of the jungle right now, and it really comes down to who has the ability to protect their own oil tankers. So Trump just lost big time, 12-1. Now there were some other oil tankers headed to China. Well, the People's Liberation Army Navy, they dispatched naval destroyers and submarines to escort those tankers safely to China. And the U.S. Navy couldn't do anything about it because the U.S. Navy no longer controls the Pacific Ocean. At least the western part of the Pacific, as they call it, that's totally controlled by China now, not America. Next image, please. So seeking a warrant in a U.S. court has no bearing in maritime law or international law. There's no justification for kidnapping Nicolas Maduro Moro any more than there was justification for kidnapping your and my foreparents. But we're back to that era. See, we'll bomb you back to the Stone Age by violating international law. So there is no law anymore. CNN, the Pentagon learned the secret of the Havana syndrome and applied it to Venezuela. See? Is that karma? Remember they were saying that all of the diplomats in Russia, in the Russian embassies in Russia, and in Havana, Cuba, they were all becoming sick with brain fog, all kinds of strange symptoms. And now this report is saying that that's what the Pentagon reverse engineered and used on Maduro's security team in Venezuela. Made them sick and nauseous and disoriented. Next image, please. See, I don't know. I'm not a military expert. Washington targets Venezuela's vast oil reserves in strategy to tackle $38.5 trillion U.S. debt. See, I think you might recall 2 weeks ago, I pointed out that the day after Christmas, a lot of the sovereign debt of America came due, that they had to pay the creditors who had bought U.S. Treasury bonds. And $3 trillion was due by December 27th. And America tried to raise $3 trillion from their allies who promised that they would, but they came up short. So for the first time in history, America defaulted on a part of their sovereign debt, not the total $38 trillion, but $3 trillion of it. 10% of it was defaulted on. And so when they tried to sell other treasury bonds to refinance the other debt that is coming due, because on top of the 3 trillion that I just mentioned, there's another 9 trillion that is soon coming due. So that'll equal $12 trillion. And so basically Trump says if we can take control and claim control of the Venezuelan oil, then that will be collateral that will cover at least half of the $38 trillion. Because that will equal 17 trillion. So that's what this is all about. So then he can go to the international bankers and say, hey, we have collateral now. We have collateral. We got 303 billion barrels of oil in Venezuela, and I'm in charge. And so now you can lend us some more money so we can pay off the national debt, or at least the interest on it. Next image, please. That's what it's all about. America's bankrupt. Okay, was that the last one?
That was the last one.
Okay, so there we go. We'll romp around the world, and the world is being run like romper room by very infantile individuals who are very, very sick intellectually, very, very sick emotionally. And if you want to look that up, see, this comes under the title of the Saturnalia. The Saturnalia. So we're living, they call it the end times, but some viewpoints would call it the Saturnalia. And these would be the 7 days or the 7 years of misrule, where in the Roman days, they would literally have like a 7 day Saturnalia And sometimes in modern times they call that what's coming up now. They're going to have the carnival in Brazil. See, that goes all the way back to Roman days. Then part of that was the 7 days of misrule. And some people say in the end times that will end up being 7 years of misrule, where they literally elect a fool to rule over them for 7 days in Roman Empire days. And so that's what you're looking at all around the world. You see, in my opinion, that's my opinion. We're living in an era of misrule, where the world is being ruled by fools. Donald Trump is a fool, clearly. Before him, Joe Biden was a fool. Kamala Harris was a fool. If you look at the leaders in Europe, of Francis Macron, he's a moron. You know, Merz in Germany, he's a moronic criminal. Look at Bibi Netanyahu. You know, these are fools. These are morons. These are criminally insane people, and they're all on the world stage. And so, if my surmise is anywhere close to correct, then it's going to be about 7 years of misrule under the authority of these fools. And if they don't kill us all, then after that, then the world returns to sanity, where maritime law, international law, the law of the land and the sea is respected by all nations. Human rights are respected. Freedom of speech is respected. Freedom of religion is respected. But how can that come about until an end is put to these lunatics who are currently running things? You know, and so that's the challenge before the entire world. So that about wraps it up. That's about what I wanted to say this evening. And I don't know if we have time for questions or if there are any questions.
We do have one question.
Oh, we do? Okay, let's hear from our questioner.
Brother Dawood, you can go ahead with your question or comment.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes, sir.
Doc, my question is, you know, since this whole Maduro thing and how America went in there, which was it was a classic episode how they went in there and took that man. How, you know, I got this little foreign this guy I watch on YouTube, geopolitician, and he laid out how the Army and Navy went in there, which was a clinic. It was a military clinic, but although America has lost a whole lot of influence behind this. But my question is, brother, what if anything can America say to Russia about Ukraine, and what can she say to China about Taiwan now in the aftermath of this whole Venezuela thing?
Well, she never had anything to say that was truthful about Ukraine to Russia, nor did she ever have a foot to stand on vis-a-vis Taiwan and China. Don't forget, Taiwan is a province of China. So why does America think that she has a right to interfere in the internal affairs of China? What would America feel like if China put troops on the ground in some state in America and said, we're going to defend this state against the government in Washington? You see, so that's essentially what's been going on in Taiwan, the illegal occupation by America of a province of China. And that's why, although I mentioned earlier in the broadcast the tremendous leadership of China in economics and, you know, in technological advancements, but yet you see the shame that's still on China that prevents anyone from taking China seriously as a superpower. If you're a superpower, China, how come you don't kick America out of one of the provinces in your country? Why don't you just kick them out? America can come into your country and bring troops and weapons And Trump just authorized another couple of $1 billion worth of weapons going to Taiwan. You see, so again, America just engages in illegal operations all the time. So they are breaking Chinese law. They are insulting Chinese sovereignty. Just as much as Bibi Netanyahu is on the rampage in the Middle East. He doesn't care anything about your sovereignty. Russia had no alternative to protect their sovereignty but to intervene in the Ukraine. See, again, we live in a mystified propaganda era. Ukraine is not the name of any country. Go look it up in the United Nations. There's no recognized boundary for a country called Ukraine. There's only 2 countries in the world that do not have recognized international boundaries. One of them is Ukraine, and the other one is Israel. And they did that on purpose. In other words, you cannot define the boundaries of Israel. You can't find any record where they agreed to stick to verified borders, leaving open the possibility that they could always expand their borders as far as they want to, because they never wrote down precisely where any of their borders are. Same in Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is not the name of a country. The Ukraine is the name of a region of Russia. It's just like we say the Midwest. I mean, suppose somebody invaded the Midwest and say, now the Midwest is a country and we're going to arm it to the teeth and we're going to attack the rest of the country. The Midwest is not a country. It's a region in a country. So that's what Ukraine has always been. Kiev was founded by the Russian Orthodox Church. Now the government in Kiev has outlawed the Russian Orthodox Church, where it was founded, and put the Russian Orthodox Patriarch in jail and burned down the Russian Orthodox churches. And of course, Odessa, one of the greatest cities in the Ukraine, who was the founder of Odessa except Catherine the Great? So everything about the Ukraine is Russian. And nobody even thought of the Ukraine as a separate country until Joseph Stalin, for some bizarre reason, granted the Ukraine, a certain amount of autonomy that it didn't have before. But it was always a part of Russia. So how dare NATO invade a part of Russia and say we can have military bases in a part of Russia if we want to? Just like how dare America invade China in Taiwan and say we can have a military base there if we want to. And we can fire on China if we want to, anytime we want to. Well, we're living at a time where, see, that kind of delusion of grandeur and world rulership. I mean, who was that group that used to talk about everybody want to rule the world? Well, that's what you're looking at. People who want to rule the world, and they're finding out they can't do it. But it's a dramatic situation, so keep tuned on the edge of your seat. So maybe one more question, if there is one.
That was that.
Okay, so we're at about a 1 hour mark here. So this has been the 19th Element, and this is, of course, a part of the Calfani Radio Network. I'm speaking to you from the home studios of Calfani Radio Network, and that is a work in progress. And we want it to be a real network. We want it to have real studios. And so we're working hard in the name of Allah to bring about that reality. Just as we're working hard in the name of Allah to bring about a reality for something called the 9 Ministries. And in that direction, the people that I'm affiliated with prayer and fasting, we have declared 2026. You see, we have declared 2026 to be a year of lawful, deliberative dialogue. And let it be a national dialogue where we who consider ourselves to be a part of the Nation of Islam, let us convene a national dialogue, maybe at Savior's Day, and other venues as well. Because I'm reminded that Savior's Day 1975 was not in Chicago. So maybe Savior's Day 2026 will not also be in Chicago because of various reasons. And so those are some of my predictions for 2026. This will be the year of national dialogue. But I'm reminded, as I close tonight's broadcast, I'm reminded of what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said. He said, it is men and women who make things happen. It is men and women who make things happen. So whatever is going to happen in 2026, it's you and I that have to make it so. So thanks for being with us. This has been the 19th Element. I'm your host, Dr. Alim. Now, yesterday we had a little problem, technically, schedule conflicts and whatnot. So the Your Immunity Project will be rebroadcast Thursday, I think, at the usual time on the usual platforms. So if you thought you missed it, no, you didn't. You know, it's been recorded, and you'll be able to see it by tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Assalamu alaikum. Be with us next week, 7 p.m. Tuesday for the Your Immunity Project, 7 p.m. Wednesday for the second half of the survival show, the 19th Element. I just heard an explosion go off. And that'll do it for tonight's 19th Element. Thanks for being with us.